Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of one of history's most infamous traitors. But what if the story we've all been told is a complete fabrication? This single line from the novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, has basically defined Wei Yan for centuries. It paints this picture of a man who is literally born a traitor, destined to rebel, a fatal flaw that only the genius strategist Zhuge Liang could spot. It's a fantastic, dramatic story, but that's all it is, a story. Because here's the thing. When you push the novel aside and actually dig into the historical records, the story changes completely. It stops being this simple tale about destiny and becomes something way more complex, more human, and honestly, a lot more tragic. So to really understand what happened, we have to separate these two versions of the same man. On one side, you've got the hot-headed villain from the book, and on the other, you have the historical general, a man who was a trusted commander, a bold strategist, and ultimately the victim of a political takedown. Okay, so let's get right into it. Probably the biggest piece of proof that the real Wei Yan was no traitor comes directly from his king, Liu Bei. It was a single decision he made that left pretty much everyone speechless. And you have to understand, this wasn't just any old job. Hanzhong was the front door to the entire kingdom of Shu. It was the buffer against their biggest, most dangerous enemy. So whoever Liu Bei picked for this post, well, that was a massive public declaration of trust. The obvious choice, the safe bet, was Zhang Fei. Everybody thought it was going to be him, including Zhang Fei himself. This is Liu Bei's sworn brother, one of the founders of the kingdom, an absolute legend on the battlefield. It was a no-brainer. But then, in a move that nobody saw coming, Liu Bei holds this huge assembly and gives the job to Wei Yan. He just completely bypassed his own brother, his closest comrades, all the famous veterans, and chose the guy he thought was best for the job, period. And to drive the point home, Liu Bei asked him right there, in front of everyone, how he planned to defend this crucial spot. Wei Yan's answer was just pure, uncut confidence. This speech showed everyone exactly why he was chosen. Now, does that sound like a guy who's secretly plotting a betrayal? So, okay, we've established that Wei Yan was a brilliant commander, and he had the king's absolute trust. So, where did it all go wrong? Well, that brilliance came packaged with a really dangerous personality flaw, one that would end up costing him everything. And if you want a perfect snapshot of how his mind worked, look no further than his Ziwu Valley Plan. This was an absolutely audacious, high-risk, high-reward gambit. He wanted to take 10,000 of their best soldiers on a secret death march through the mountains, pop out of nowhere, and snatch the enemy capital to win the whole war in one go. But Zhuge Liang, he was a much more careful, meticulous commander. He looked at this plan and said, absolutely not, way too risky. And you can see his point, right? If it failed, their best troops would be trapped and annihilated. Historians still argue about it. Was this a moment of genius that Zhuge Liang was too cautious to take, or did he save them from a complete catastrophe? And this really gets to the heart of the problem with Wei Yan. He was undeniably brave and skilled. Zhuge Liang always had him leading the charge as the tip of the spear. But that talent came with this incredible arrogance. He was just impossible to work with. The historical records are blunt. They say pretty much everyone kept their distance from him. And this arrogance fueled a particularly disastrous rivalry with one guy, Yang Yi, the army's chief administrator. They were like two sides of the same coin, both brilliant, both arrogant, and they absolutely despised each other. The classic fire and water. And look, this wasn't some quiet office beef. It was openly hostile. The records tell us that during heated arguments, Wei Yan would literally pull out his sword and wave it in Yang Yi's face. Other generals constantly had to step in between them. It was a completely toxic and broken command structure. So you've got this ticking time bomb of a feud at the very top of the army. It was just waiting for a spark, and that spark came when their commander, Zhuge Liang, died. The whole thing finally exploded, not into a rebellion, but into a ruthless political hit job. And just look at how fast it all fell apart. Day one, Zhuge Liang dies, and he secretly puts Yang Yi in charge of the retreat. Wei Yan finds out he's supposed to take orders from his mortal enemy, and he just snaps. He doesn't just disobey, he marches his troops ahead and starts tearing up the roads to block his rival. It turns into this insane race to the capital, with both men firing off messages to the emperor, each one screaming that the other guy is the traitor. So just imagine being the emperor, right? You get these two frantic messages. Wei Yan is saying Yang Yi is a coward, he's the traitor for retreating, and Yang Yi is saying Wei Yan is disobeying the chancellor's dying wish, he's the traitor. It's a classic case of he said, he said. And in that kind of fight, political allies are everything. And Wei Yan, the brilliant general nobody liked, had exactly zero. So, of course, the court sided with Yang Yi. The second that official decree arrived from the capital, the one that called Wei Yan a traitor, his own soldiers just walked away. They abandoned him on the spot. All that political isolation he'd built up for himself had just turned into a death sentence. But if you need any more proof that this was personal, just listen to what happened next. After Wei Yan was hunted down and killed, Yang Yi had his severed head brought to him. He threw it on the ground, stomped on it, and screamed at it. That is not the state executing a traitor. That is pure, raw, personal hatred. So how on earth did this messy, tragic political execution get rewritten into this simple, clean story of a villain meeting his destiny? Well, that's where the power of a good story and a famous novel comes in. You can see right here how it all got transformed. The novel just flattened everything. It took a really complex, messy reality, this difficult but brilliant guy who gets outmaneuvered in a power struggle, and it turned it into a simple good versus evil morality play. It makes for a much more satisfying story, right? The wise Zhuge Liang was right all along, and the bad guy got what he deserved. It's a great narrative, but it's just not what happened. And that's really the big takeaway here. Wei Yan's story is such a powerful reminder that history is almost always written by the winners. It really makes you wonder, how many other villains from our history books weren't actually evil? How many were just on the losing side of a political battle, and then on the losing side of the story that got told afterwards? Because sometimes the story that survives isn't the truth. It's just the better story.